Chapter 76. Grose's ears perked from just the mention of Jeff. He wagged his bushy tail so hard that his body waved and tangled fur. Ashley was tempted to pick him up and stroke him, but she resisted.
"Yes, that's it,"
Tina encouraged.
"You know who I'm talking about, don't you, boy?"
He barked softly and leaped into the air. And before he landed, his little legs were already turning to propel him down the hall. Ashley and Tina tried keeping up with the dog's abundant energy. Once in a while he stopped and sniffed underneath doors, as though gathering scents, giving the girls a chance to catch up. Ashley couldn't help feeling responsible somehow for Laura's death. The woman must have died in her sleep as Ashley watched over her. Laura had been alive before, hadn't she? Ashley was the oldest girl and should have been more diligent, but she didn't know what she could have done differently. Maybe she should have checked on Laura more than once. When Grose skidded to a stop in the middle of the hallway and began growling, Ashley slowed to a walk. Fear sped her heart. Danger was ahead, enough to steal Grose's excitement for Jeff, which was saying a lot. The dog held his ground, still growling as the girls caught up. Out from the next intersection leapt a man on all fours, covered with white hair. His fingernails and toenails were long and yellowed. As soon as he saw Grose, the man hissed and spat. Ashley got closer to the little dog, fearing for him.
"Go."
He was so cute. Grose didn't appear afraid at all. This encouraged Ashley. He bared his teeth and barked. The man spun around and galloped away.
"Who or what was that?"
Tina asked.
"Yeah."
She looked at Tina. Grose began to walk slowly forward, and they followed. A door opened to their left, causing the girls to jump right, and the dog to leap left. "Hey," Jeff said, startled, walking out with Grose attached to his leg. "What are you guys doing here?" Jeff was so accustomed to the dog's reaction that he didn't even acknowledge it. Sadness blended with relief inside Ashley.
"We're looking for you."
She went to pluck Grose off Jeff's leg. Donald asked, "The cat man gone?"
"The what?"
Jeff shook his head. "How's Laura? Is she awake?" Ashley didn't know how to answer. "How come you guys aren't waiting with her?" She knew Jeff liked Laura. She didn't want to be the one to deliver terrible news. She had already been responsible for the tremendous loss Tina suffered. But Ashley didn't want Tina to have to be the one to tell him either. Both Ashley and Tina spoke at once.
"She's gone."
"Gone? Where? I told you guys to stay with her." They both looked down. "Why didn't you stay?" Jeff asked anxiously.
"We can't afford to lose her. There are no exits. The place, it's psychotic."
Donald suggested, "Well, maybe it's just a healing transformation of—"
"Shut up already with that,"
Tina said somberly.
"She didn't leave. She's Dad. Dead? Jeff's face turned white. That's not possible. You must be mistaken. We took her pulse. There was no beat. When? Just 15 minutes ago. Heavy guilt blanketed Ashley, sagging her shoulders. She should have kept better watch over Laura. She set Graze down and felt like crumbling onto the floor with him, never to rise again. Jeff looked so serious. Where is she? Back in the room. Show me the way. They went back. Tears like sour lemon drops fell from his face and wet the white sheet above Laura's body. Ashley didn't like what was happening to them. It wasn't right. Laura and Charlie were good people. Jeff and Tina didn't deserve to lose them. Why was this happening? Why didn't good things happen to good people? Wasn't that the way things worked? Ashley believed in karma. She believed in those sayings, what comes around goes around. You sow what you reap. You get what you give. The energy you put out is reflected back to you. So where was all that bad karma coming from? What wrong had they done? With a bitter coldness, she understood. They had done no wrong. It was her. There was something about Ashley that had brought darkness into her friends' lives. She was bad luck or just plain bad, and they were being punished for being with her, helping her, and believing in her. She excused herself to go to the bathroom, but as everyone was preoccupied comforting Jeff, she headed out the room and down the hall. She didn't know where she was going. She just had to get away from everyone to keep them safe. Who would die next if she stuck around? And she needed to be alone to think things through. What had she done that had brought all the abuse, neglect, and pain to herself and her friends? Besides not appreciating her mother, she couldn't remember doing anything bad, saying anything dreadful, or hurting anyone else. She felt like cutting. Clicking noises came from behind her. She turned. Graze caught up. Go away, dog, she ordered. I'm not safe. Little Graze blinked, and his big green eyes looked so cute. Go. She had to pick him up and squeeze him. She just had to. He licked her face and whined, worried for her. Why? She deserved more bad things to happen to her. He was an innocent dog who evidently didn't have knowledge and understanding of how the universe worked. He couldn't possibly see that she was being disciplined. If he could talk, she would try explaining, but even then he might not get it. Although he was sweet, he was naive and gullible to trust in her. That was his weakness. That was what would keep him around and eventually harm him. Although it tore her heart, she had to drive him away. Ashley put down the dog and cried, Go! And simultaneously slapped her foot down hard on the floor next to him to scare him away. He just stood there. Sit. Graze sat. His face looked sorrowful, like he was being scolded. But she needed to do this. Stay. She touched him on the nose with her index finger to emphasize her command. His nose was cold and moist. Then she began to walk backwards, making sure he didn't follow. Graze watched her, lowered his head, raised it, whined, and waved a paw in the air. Stay, she warned, pointing at him. He woofed softly. Stay. He stood and took a step. Stay, Graze. He woofed again, a little louder. Ashley quickly turned and sprinted down the hall, taking a right at the first intersection, a left at the next, and a right again. She turned to check behind her and saw Graze following at her heels, tongue lolling out, legs blurring, appearing as though he was enjoying this exciting new game. She stopped. No, she scolded. You stay. You understand? You stay. He tilted his head in that irresistible, cute way dogs do when confused. She squatted, kissed him on the head, and pet him. I know you're a good dog. I know you just want to protect me, but I'm no good. She loved him. If anything bad happened to him, she would never forgive herself. She wasn't going to lead him into harm. She pushed his rear down so he would sit. Now you stay. You hear? She scowled at him as fiercely as she could and pointed, her finger muscles tense. Stay. He pawed at the air. No, stay. She began backing away again, wondering if this was ever going to work. Turning and running, tears fell from her eyes. Why wouldn't he listen? He listened to Tina, and before Ashley could even get winded, she heard his clicking paws behind her. Oh, she stopped. No, Graze, you have to stay. Do you understand? I'm bad. Graze woofed. I'm no good. Woof. He came to her feet and nuzzled them, whining. You'll get hurt. She thought of locking him inside a room, but then he wouldn't be able to get back to the others and help them, and he would be left behind when the others escaped. He looked up at her. Small as he was, he had an enormous heart. Why did most religions not include dogs in heaven? It was stupid and self-centered to make heaven an exclusive club for humans, like it were some private golf course only for the rich. Animals had just as much right to move on to an afterlife, had just as much love, just as much soul, and just as many trials and tribulations on this planet as humans. She turned him around so he was facing away, had him lay on the floor, and ordered, Stay! He kept down, but craned his neck around to watch. She walked quickly and kept looking back so he wouldn't sneak. Good dog, stay. That's it. She began to jog. Stay. When she checked on him again, he was standing, turned forward to face her. She slowed. No, stay. He ran to her. She stopped and groaned. He would never stay. He was too loyal, kind, and loving. Okay, if you aren't going to listen, then it'll be your fault when you get hurt. Do you hear me? I know you understand. Graze didn't even make eye contact. He snorted like he thought her words were nonsense. She squatted at his level. Look at me, silly. You're making a mistake. You hear? Tina needs you more than me. He looked away from her. She held his face, so he had to look. Go back, Mutt. Please. Her eyes blurred. Please, I don't want you hurt. Please listen to me. He whimpered. She released his head and began walking away, hoping, praying, crossing her fingers that he wouldn't follow. But he did. "Stupid dog." She immediately resented saying such an awful thing. He reached her side and looked up with sad eyes. "I'm sorry. I just want you." She sighed. It was useless to stop him. She squatted down again. "You're sure about this?" He cocked an ear and looked down the hall where she had been heading. "Okay, silly. I guess I don't have a choice." So down the hall she and Grazé walked, the hall that seemed to go nowhere in particular. She didn't care, though. She had nowhere to go. She felt like going into a room, laying on a bed and cutting herself deep. If she bled to death, she wouldn't keep bringing bad things to her friends and Grazé. Dying was one way to leave Grazé and keep him safe. It was the only way. Once she was dead, the dog would return to the others and be free from her bad karma. Grazé stopped to sniff by a door on the right. She stopped as well. It could have been any door for Ashley. For her, it didn't matter. She opened it. Inside was just another room, furnished like all the others. But this one was different. This room was the one she would die in. She decided the bed closest to the door was a good place to bleed. She left the door halfway open so Grazé could return to the others after she was dead. Going into the bathroom, she found a rusty razor blade underneath the sink. Perfect. Finally, good luck. This was rare. It must be fate working for her because she was doing the right thing. The world didn't want her around. It was functioning to simplify her death. She lay on the bed, and Grazé jumped up with her, standing beside and looking curious. She took the razor in her left hand and traced a line on her right wrist where she would cut. This was the hardest part. Once she did it, the rest would be easy. After cutting in the past, she always felt some peace. She needed that peace now. This time she would cut deep and reach a final peace. But what if Tina was right about this hospital being a waiting area for the dead? Then after Ashley cut, she would find herself just bloody and mangled. When the others ran into her again, she would scare them, appearing like a mutilated, disgusting zombie. Hopefully this was reality, like Laura had promised. But Laura had already broken one promise. Maybe this hospital was a dream, and after awakening, she would go back to reality with her mother. Right now, she could be asleep on her bright yellow comforter, with Pixie cuddled beside her, purring and dreaming. There was a mystery about death which was attractive to her for the last few years. She traced another imaginary cut along her right wrist. Grazé growled. "Hey, don't growl at me." But afterwards she changed her mind. She wanted him to growl. The dog was finally seeing the worst in her and turning against her. This was good. Maybe now he wouldn't mind leaving. "Go away," she tested. The dog stayed on the bed, but stopped growling, intently staring into her eyes and then at her right wrist. She brought the blade to her wrist again. Grrr. It made her feel uncomfortable to be rejected by the one who was so loyal, loving, and protective of her. But at least he was seeing the truth now. She knew he had every right to growl. She was bad. She deserved it. He stopped growling, but his green eyes wouldn't leave her. He
He stepped between her wrist and body. She pushed the rusty blade through her giving skin and began to pull it across. Grazé barked. She kept going. Grazé gently closed his teeth around the hand that held the blade. Then he pulled it off the bleeding wrist. After stepping up onto her stomach, he dropped the hand with the razor on the other side. He moved back to her wounded wrist and began licking it clean. Ashley understood. He hadn't been growling at her. He had been trying to stop her from cutting. He still hadn't given up on her. He believed in her, even when she had lost belief in herself. He had never thought she was bad, not for a moment. He had always believed in her goodness. She began crying uncontrollably on the bed that was supposed to hold her death. She choked out tears, feeling tremendous emptiness flowing through her, trying to retch it out with each sob, each spasm of her body. Why was this dog so good? Why couldn't he just let her die? What could possibly be inside her worth saving? He saw something. Maybe it was because he wasn't as intelligent as a human. But he saw something. He wouldn't allow her harm. He wouldn't let her kill herself. She hated that, but that also made her adore him more than ever, made her desire Grazé to be around her always. She hugged the little dog, feeling his soft, warm fur. As he licked her face clean of tears, which had come deep inside from uncaring people, she squeezed him tight. She couldn't help the fact that this dog was in her life. But he didn't whine and protest, didn't try squirming away from her hug. Beside Grazé's relentless devotion, caring, and affection, she warmed her feelings of love, security, and value. Ron Burns groaned. His left leg burned from the accursed dog that had bit him. His head throbbed in pain. He pushed himself up off the floor and went to the bathroom to look in the mirror. Blood crusted along his short hair, down the right side of his face, ending at his chin. His left leg had tiny teeth marks in it. Assholes! Ron vowed to first reap revenge on the bastard dog. Cut out its green eyes, crush each of its furry paws under his foot, hammer loose all of its white teeth, break its skinny spine in half, all while Ashley watched. For some reason, the bitch girl cared about the dog. She had fought hard to save it. Torturing the dog in front of her would be perfect punishment for her defiance. After the dog was dead, he would rape Ashley. No more Mr. Nice Guy. He wasn't going to be gentle like he planned before. There would be bruising, bleeding, and many tears. Afterwards, he would strangle her into unconsciousness again and again, until she eventually died. Her last visions being his sneering face. Then he would hunt down Jeff and Tina, drug them back to sleep, and smother Jeff. Tina really didn't do anything to him, so he would let her live. Besides, she was part of his insurance. The police would never get involved as long as enough research subject lived. Project X had illegally held subjects against their will, and the staff would never allow a police investigation if some subjects could tattle on them.
Ron would be gone before sunrise, with no one pursuing him for his deadly axe. He rushed back between the beds and pulled on his pants, shirt, and shoes. With his hands trembling from excitement and rage, he was barely able to tie his shoelaces. Ron grabbed a pillow and pressed it into his face, screaming.